Why consider going the DIY route on a home improvement project? Well, there's a lot of good reasons, and I'm going to show you why. So let's look at the alternative first, hiring a contractor. When you receive a quote from a contractor, the contractor develops a quote based on what I call the 5/4 rule. And it's how he looks at his costs in terms of how to bid on the project for you. So what we look at here is, from a contractor's perspective, he's got 5/4, if you will, of costs that he needs to assign to the project. And we start off with number one, cost of materials. That represents about 25% of the cost of the project. The second item in his cost analysis is labor. So 25% of the cost of the project is associated with his labor to do the work for you. The next 25% is associated with overhead. This is the cost of his insurances, the equipment, the tools he needs, his vehicles, his, let's say, rent or lease on the building that or office he operates out of. Those are all overhead costs. And the next cost are taxes. Taxes to Uncle Sam, the federal government, taxes to Cousin Sam, the state and local governments, etc. So this makes up all of his costs. Everything below here makes up all of his costs. The other 25% here is what he wants to budget for profit for doing the work. So when he quotes your project, has to factor in all these costs plus his profit margin. Now this is just a general rule of thumb. The cost could actually be, or the quote could actually be higher than what you see here, because you may want to increase the profit margin, and that is somewhat dependent upon supply and demand, market conditions, etc. But a general rule of thumb is, when you receive a quote, the actual cost for the material and the labor to do the work is roughly only about 40% of the overall cost of the job. So if you can do the work yourself, you could potentially rule out labor, overhead, taxes, and his profits, and do the project for approximately only 20% of a quote that you would receive from a contractor. Now the question comes is, do you have the skills to actually do the work yourself? And you might be surprised on the answer to that if you reflect on it a little bit. So before I get into whether or not you're capable of doing the DIY project, let's look at one example. In this case, installing replacement windows. Let's say you get a quote from a contractor. The contractor quote is for $12,500 to replace a number of windows. Again, using that 5/4 formula, we have approximately $2,500 budgeted in the quote associated with the actual windows themselves, the replacement windows, $2,500 for the labor to install the windows, $2,500 for the contractor's overhead, $2,500 for the taxes he's going to pay to the IRS and the state and local municipalities, and roughly about $2,500 profit for him to do the job. Again, for $12,500. So if we can eliminate all these costs and do the project for $2,500 plus our own sweat equity, we can save a small fortune and ensure a very good return on investment of the installation of these windows. And again, the question comes down is, are you capable of installing the windows yourself? You're going to be surprised on the answer. So in the case of considering installing replacement windows on your own or doing it yourself, you've got to ask yourself three basic questions. Number one, what tools are required for the job? In the case of installing replacement windows, it comes down to being able to use a level, using a square, using a hammer, using a screw gun, some shims, and possibly a sawzall, and possibly a miter saw if you're going to be doing the interior trim work, or maybe if it requires an exterior trim work, you'll need the miter saw to make those nice angled cuts. If you have those tools available, or you're willing to pay for them, and I certainly think that a sawzall and particularly a miter saw come in handy for any homeowner, that plans to do any type of improvement work in the house, I highly recommend getting those tools. But if you feel that you have those tools and are capable of using those tools, and lastly, if you have the time to do this project, then installing replacement windows is an excellent DIY project to do. So you really have to answer those three questions yourself honestly. But overall, I think most homeowners are going to be able to answer yes to all three of those questions. And if they do, then I would certainly recommend installing the replacement windows. In regards to the timeline, I'll just say maybe your first installation may take you a couple hours to do, but after you get going on that first or second one, you'll probably get the work of installing a replacement window down to about an hour. So if you're replacing all the windows in the front of your home and you had to clone a home with maybe 8 to 10 windows, you probably could get the whole job done, all the windows done in about a day and a half of effort, worst case. So yes, in this particular case, installing replacement windows can save you a fortune doing it yourself, and it doesn't require a lot of investment, and it doesn't really require a lot of time, especially when you compare what you'd be paying to have somebody else do it. So besides saving money, what are other good reasons for going the DIY route? Well, number one, you're doing it on your timeline, not the contractor's timeline. And particularly in these days, when you go out and request for quote for contractors, if you're lucky enough to get a quote, you may wait for weeks, if not most likely months, to get the contractor to come out to the site and actually do the work. So if you want to get the job done, you want it done on your timeline, it's better to do it yourself. Number two, personal satisfaction and confidence building. When you complete a project on your own, there's just this personal feeling of accomplishment and satisfaction that you get with it. And also it's a confidence builder. You realize that you are capable of actually, in this case, installing replacement windows, or whatever DIY project you want to consider doing. Number three, you control the cash flow. If, for example, you're installing replacement windows, but you only have a limited budget of cash available, you can do so many windows as your budget allows, and just kind of work your way. You might do 2 or 3 windows this month, and the next month do 2 or 3 more windows, etc., so that you never have to worry about going in debt or worry about having to pay for those windows. And then lastly, by going the DIY route, you eliminate or reduce the risk of having to finance, which adds to the overall cost of these projects. So again, if you can cash flow it yourself out of your savings, you're going to be much better off down the road in terms of ensuring a good return on investment and not put yourself in debt. So those are all the other good reasons, and I'm sure there's many others, and if you have opinions and other good reasons for going the DIY route, I'm very interested to hear them. Just comment below. I'd like to hear what you have for comments in that area. So what are some other good DIY home improvement candidate projects to consider? Well, first of all, you want to consider projects that aren't really highly skilled, that require skilled craftsmanship. Number two, don't require state or federal licensing. Or 3, don't require expensive or unique tools that you would have very little use to use other than for that one particular project. If any of those projects that you're considering meet those 3 categories, then it's worth considering as a DIY project. I'm listed a few here that I'll talk about. Number 1, house painting is right off the bat. Exterior or interior house painting, great projects to do. They really improve the value of your home, particularly the outside. And it's very low skill, and all that you need is, other than the material in terms of paint and some paint brushes and maybe some ladders, you're in good shape. It's not an expensive project, not hard to do, doesn't require any state or federal licenses. Interior trim, same deal. You do need a miter saw for that. There is a little bit of skill. Start off small, a window maybe, baseboard trim, etc., and build from there. But you'll find with a little bit of practice, you can do a very good job and do it much more cost effectively than hiring a finished carpenter. Adding insulation. If you need more insulation in your attic, or if you're building an addition and need to put wall insulation in, do it yourself. No skills required, no special tools required, no licensing required. Hardwood floor installation. You may need a certain tool that you can rent for the day from a box store, home improvement box store, but other than that, hardwood floor installation is fairly easy to do. There's plenty of videos online. Matter of fact, most of the items here I have videos of me actually doing these projects, so check out Home Edition Plus, his YouTube channel. and just put a search in for it, and you'll see almost any one of these projects show up. Another one is faux stone veneer installation. Again, basic saw, a little bit of mortar experience, not hard to do, relatively easy, surprisingly easy DIY project. Tiling, wall tiling, floor tiling, backsplash tiling. With a tile saw, it might cost you $100 to $200 for a tile saw, but once you've done tiling once, you'll want to do it over and over again for other projects. It's well worth the $100 to $200 investment in a tile saw. Clapboard replacement. If you have wood clapboard in particular, over time you get rot, stain, etc. that cause certain certain clapboard pieces that may need to be cut out and replaced. Again, very easy to do with a couple basic tools. Paver walkway installation. Again, other than the stone being some weight, there's not a lot of skill required in that. No special state licenses, etc. Drain gutters, particularly vinyl gutters that you can buy from the box stores already, are great candidates for installing yourself. If you're doing a major home gutter installation and you're doing, like say, aluminum gutters, extruded aluminum gutters, you may want to hire a pro. But if you've got a small area that you just need to put up some gutters, you might be able to get away with vinyl gutters, and you can install those yourself with just basically a level and a hacksaw. Composite deck railing, another thing. If you have just a miter saw, you can put in a new composite deck railing, replacing those old wooden railings that kind of warp and bow and kind of chip, etc. From weather. You can do that yourself. But anyway, this is just a list of about half a dozen or so other DIY home improvement project candidates to consider that meet the criteria for doing. So if you have a home improvement project that you're considering, look at the DIY route a little bit more carefully and see if it qualifies as something that you could do yourself. And if you do decide to do it yourself, you'll be amazed and shocked once you're done how easy it was to do and how accomplished you're going to feel when you actually get it done. And that's going to build more confidence for you to do future DIY projects, and in the process save yourselves a fortune in money and continue to improve your confidence going forward. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, hit the notification bell so you get notified when I come out with a new video. And if you have any comments on this video, make sure to comment below. Also to add, I have hundreds of videos that I've been filming on this channel since 2007, and everything including installing replacement windows, and most of the items on this list here are actually shown on the video and actually doing them in a how-to fashion. I also sell home improvement ebooks on various topics such as installing replacement windows, doing tiling projects, etc. So again, check it out at Home Edition Plus.